Hi, my name's Ilara. They used to call me invisible until the money showed up. Then suddenly, I was family again. But not to be loved, to be used. They rewrote my story, stole my name, forged my signature, then filed a lawsuit when I said no. I kept quiet for years, until silence started costing me more than speaking ever could. Would you call that love or control? Let me tell you what really happened. I didn't expect much when I pulled into the gravel driveway that afternoon. The house looked exactly the same as it had 20 years ago. Same faded shutters, same crooked porch swing that always threatened to snap. It wasn't nostalgia that made me late. I just couldn't stomach the idea of being on time for a party where I was more of an afterthought than a guest. I stepped out of my car in a beige dress I knew wouldn't stand out. Subtle, neutral, forgettable. That was the point. A few cousins waved half-heartedly from the porch. One of them hugged me like she hadn't just posted a Facebook status last month that read, "Some people forget where they came from once they make it." I didn't forget. I just stopped pretending they ever saw me clearly. Inside, the celebration was already in full swing. White and gold balloons floated beneath the low ceiling. The buffet line wound through the kitchen, and someone had made a giant poster with "Happy 50th, Theta and Vernell," plastered in glitter letters above a slideshow of old family photos looping on the TV. I scanned the room quickly. I wasn't in any of those pictures. Not the childhood ones, not the birthday parties, not even the holidays from just a few years back. I paused in front of the screen. It felt intentional, like a quiet erasure with a smile. The kind that's hard to prove but impossible to ignore. "Hey, Elle," Maris said, sweeping past with a champagne flute in hand. "Glad you made it. We were just about to take the family photo." I nodded. "Where do you want me?" She laughed. "Actually, we're short on hands. Can you take it? You're good with tech, right?" I stood there holding the camera, watching them pose. Mom fixed her blouse. Dad tugged his tie. Jarrett made a joke that made everyone laugh, just as I clicked the button. The picture turned out nice, framed even. I saw it the next day when someone posted it online. Me, not included. Again. I didn't say anything. I just helped myself to a small plate of potato salad, made the rounds with polite hellos, and slipped out the back door while no one was looking. The air outside was heavy with heat. I walked past the barn and toward my car, heels crunching against the gravel. On the way out, I passed the guest book table. No one had asked me to sign it, so I didn't. Sliding into the driver's seat, I glanced down at my phone. No new messages. I opened the Notes app and typed, "They never saw me, but someday they'll want to." 7 years earlier, I'd stood in that same house, much less sure of myself, far more desperate to be seen. It was after dinner. I'd cleaned up while Maris scrolled on her phone, and Jarrett talked about his latest flip property. I waited until Dad stepped out to check the fuse box, then quietly asked, "Jarrett, could I borrow $5,000? He didn't even pause. "For what?" "I want to start something," I said. "Online real estate tech. I've been working on some tools, taking classes after work." He laughed. Actually laughed. Loud enough that Mom turned from the sink and raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly a business type, Elle," he said. "Maybe just get a real job?" Mom didn't say anything, just rinsed another plate. Jarrett leaned back, shaking his head. "Look, I'm not gonna fund a pipe dream. It's not personal, just be realistic." That was the moment. I remember it more clearly than birthdays, graduations, even funerals. It wasn't the money I needed. It was the vote of confidence, and they couldn't give it. I drove home in silence that night, spent the next 3 months skipping lunch to teach myself back-end systems, took freelance gigs that barely paid, built a beta from scratch in a rented co-working space with no AC. Funny how the absence of belief can light the biggest fire under you. Back in the present, I turned on the ignition. The ranch disappeared behind me in the rearview. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt done. That night, back in my apartment, I opened that same note and reread the line I wrote earlier. Then added another, I won't beg to be in the picture. I'll build a frame they can't touch. I didn't write anything more after that note. I just closed the screen, sat back in the quiet, and let the words settle like dust. A frame they can't touch. That wasn't anger speaking. It was resolve. A decision I didn't need to announce, only live by. 2 years passed. 2 years of rebuilding, my confidence, my savings, my place in the world. I signed my first real investor, moved into an office with heat and working outlets, and stopped flinching when someone asked what I did for a living. The name Montlo started to show up in articles and awards. Funny how people start answering your calls when they hear it. Then, one Thursday morning, I got an email from Maris. Subject: surprise. Body: Mom and I are throwing a little something. You've been working so hard. We wanted to celebrate you. Just come. No pressure. No pressure. That was her favorite phrase when she was pressuring the hardest. Still, something in me, it wasn't hope, not exactly, wanted to believe it might be different this time. So I said yes. I arrived at the community hall 5 minutes early. The parking lot was already full, and I had to park 2 blocks down. When I stepped inside, I froze. This wasn't a casual dinner. It was a production. White linen tablecloths, a hired photographer, balloons in company colors. My company's colors. A banner stretched across the stage. Congratulations, Ilara, from your proud family. Proud? That word landed heavy in my stomach. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to since I was 19 waved at me like I was running for office. Someone from the mayor's office handed me a certificate. My aunt came over with a glass of punch and whispered, You always had it in you. Your mama just didn't know how to show it. I smiled. I nodded. I said thank you. But inside, I was ice. Then came the toasts. Jarrett was first. Of course he was. If it weren't for that old laptop I gave her back in the day, who knows where she'd be? He laughed, and people clapped like that was charming. Maris followed, dabbing her eyes with a cocktail napkin. I always said Ilara was destined for more. I told Mom she just needed the right push. The guests loved it. They nodded and smiled, thinking this was a family of cheerleaders, not bystanders. Not the same people who told me to get a real job while I ate instant noodles at midnight building code I didn't even know would work. I didn't say anything. I clinked my glass politely. But that silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Later, I stepped into the kitchen, mostly to breathe. Maris followed, heels clicking like punctuation marks behind me. She leaned on the counter, wine glass in hand. Wasn't that sweet? I think everyone really felt the love. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She sipped her drink and added, too casually, I was thinking, maybe we should make it official. You know, Montlo and Betrayal Consulting. Sounds stronger together, don't you think? I turned to look at her. She smiled wider. For the brand, she said. Investors like to see family unity. And technically, I did help, right? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You weren't there when it was risky, I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. You won't be there now that it's safe. Her face tightened, just for a second. Then she laughed. That airy, too loud kind of laugh she used when she didn't get her way. Oh, come on, Elle. Don't be like that. We're family. I nodded slowly. Exactly. I left before dessert. Driving home, the air in the car felt lighter than the room I'd left behind. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows over the streets, but I didn't feel tired. I rolled the windows down and let the wind tangle my hair. At a red light, I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I recorded one line. Today was the first time I saw their strategy, and not their smiles. I pulled into their driveway on a Sunday, like I had 1,000 times growing up, but the gravel didn't crunch the same. It felt louder now, like it knew I didn't belong here anymore. Maris had texted earlier, said lunch was casual. Just us, she wrote. No reason, no pressure. I knew better. Their house still had that faint smell of lemon cleaner and fried oil, the same scent that clung to my hair every time I visited. The kitchen table was already set. roast chicken, cornbread, green beans cooked too soft. My father, Vernell, sat at the head like a pastor about to deliver a sermon, while my mother hovered, refolding napkins that didn't need it. "Look who finally found time for the little people," Jarrett said as he stepped out from the hallway, chewing something he didn't bother to swallow before talking. I let the comment slide. I'd learned long ago that confronting Jarrett too early in the visit just handed him control of the tone. Lunch was full of forced laughter. My parents traded old stories about when I used to build forts under the dining table, or the time I ran away at age 6 because I didn't want to eat liver. Their voices were light, but every word was too polished, rehearsed even, like they were laying out a trail of breadcrumbs to somewhere I hadn't agreed to go. Then, after my mother cleared the plates and returned with sweet tea, Dad leaned back, folded his arms, and said it. "We've been thinking," he began. "Maybe it's time we added the family's name back onto that land deed. You know, for legacy." My glass paused halfway to my lips. "That land's in my name," I said carefully. "It's been that way since I bought it." "We know," Theta said quickly, too quickly. "It's just, it would mean something. To your grandfather, to the family name." Maris chimed in, like she hadn't practiced this line in the mirror. "It's not about taking it from you, Alara. We're just trying to keep it in the bloodline." "That's why you gave it to me," I replied, setting my glass down. "Because you said I'd take care of it." Dad shrugged. "We didn't think you'd get this far." There it was. Clean, sharp, without apology. The truth sitting in the room like a cracked window on a freezing day. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I nodded once. "Thank you for lunch." Before anyone could respond, I stood, gathered my bag, and made my way to the porch. I didn't look back. Jarrett followed me out. I could hear the shift in his steps, quicker, purposeful. "Hold up," he called. "Just a second." I stopped halfway down the stairs, but didn't turn around. "I was out of line back then," he said. "You were right to do what you did. You proved us wrong." I turned slowly. He wasn't looking at me, just kicking at the dirt with his boot. "I've got this new project I'm starting. It's got real potential. Could use your name on the paperwork. Nothing major. Just for credibility. I'll run it. You just sign off." My heart didn't pound. My stomach didn't flip. I felt nothing. "That's not how I do business." Jarrett smiled like he hadn't heard me. "Come on, Elle. We're family. You trust me, don't you?" "I take risks with ideas," I said, stepping past him. "Not people I had to survive from." I drove straight home without music, letting the silence fill the spaces his words had tried to wedge themselves into. I didn't rush, didn't slam the door when I walked into my apartment. I hung up my coat, toed off my shoes, and made a cup of chamomile tea. The kettle hissed softly, and for once, it didn't sound angry. I settled onto the couch, pulled out my laptop, and skimmed my inbox. Among the pitches and updates was a message from an old colleague, someone who'd known me before any of this. Subject: "Congrats. Would love to partner." I stared at it for a minute, then hit reply. "I appreciate the offer, but I've learned not to build futures with people who only showed up after mine started paying dividends." That night, I sat with my tea. The room dim, except for the glow of the desk lamp. I wasn't angry, not even disappointed. Just clear. If I hadn't succeeded, I would have still been the girl with the camera in the back. The one who was useful, never central. The one who didn't get to speak, only capture the moments for others. Not anymore. The next 8 weeks moved fast. Projects kept me buried. Deadlines, investor calls, onboarding new hires. I stayed busy on purpose. It was cleaner than dealing with the noise I knew was coming. But silence with my family is never permanent. It's just a commercial break before the next attempt. The invitation came through a forwarded email. A local charity was hosting a gala celebrating women entrepreneurs of the Heartland. My name was listed first under special honorees. Attached was a digital flyer. My face was on it. My bio. My company logo. All wrapped in a pink and gold banner that read, "Powered by the Betrayal Foundation." Maris. I stared at it for a full minute. I hadn't donated. I hadn't partnered. I hadn't even been informed. The gala was being held at the Tulsa Cultural Center, a spot that usually hosted traveling art exhibits or academic lectures. This time, it was draped in pastel linens, all smiles and champagne and polite applause. I arrived right before the main program began. No one greeted me at the door. A teenage volunteer handed me a name tag and waved vaguely toward the crowd. At the far end of the room, I saw it. A large standing display, 10 feet tall, lit from below. It had a timeline of my career milestones printed in gold script. Above it, the heading, "Inspired by her sister's unwavering belief." I didn't need to guess who wrote that. The program began. Maris stepped on stage in a navy sheath dress, holding a wireless mic like she belonged there. "Watching my baby sister rise into a leader," she said with just enough tremble in her voice, "has been the honor of my life. This foundation, this room, this movement, it all started because I believed in her before the world did." Polite applause, smiling nods. I stayed seated, back row, stone still. Every time I blinked, I pictured all those late nights. No funding, no backup, no belief from anyone. She hadn't believed in me. She'd doubted me out loud, in front of others. Told me I was wasting my time. Now she was turning that silence into a stage. I didn't confront her that night, not publicly. That's what she wanted. That's what they all wanted. A reaction they could spin. So I waited. I clapped when the speeches ended. I posed for one photo when cornered by the event organizer. I left before dessert again. A week later, Bryony texted me, asking if I could come by for Aunt Lorna's birthday dinner. Said she missed me. Said, "Things are weird lately." I knew what she meant, but I went anyway. The gathering was in the backyard of my uncle's house. Folding tables, plastic forks, mismatched chairs, kids running barefoot on patchy grass. I stayed near the edge, nodding at people, hugging cousins who acted like nothing had ever happened. I was pouring iced tea when I overheard it. "She's making all that money now," someone said behind me. "But did she even help when Theta had that surgery?" Another voice chimed in. "She stopped calling too. Fame goes to your head real quick, I guess." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The voices were familiar. Aunts. One of them had knitted me a scarf when I graduated high school. The other had once driven me home from a late shift when my car died. I set down the pitcher, pulled my phone from my pocket, and walked to the side of the yard where Bryony was sitting. She was scrolling through something, earbuds in. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Take a photo of everyone here." She blinked up at me. "What for?" "Documentation," I said, managing a small smile. "Just in case anyone forgets I was here." She hesitated, but raised her phone. Clicked the shutter. I didn't smile. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up the website for the Betrayal Foundation Gala. My image was still there. A headshot I'd never approved. A quote they'd never asked permission to use. I filed a takedown notice with the hosting platform. Attached screenshots. Provided timestamps. Then I opened a blank document and began drafting a cease and desist. It was precise. Formal, no emotion. I didn't send it to Maris directly. I let it go through the channels. No texts, no phone calls. The thing about warnings is, if they're ignored long enough, they stop being warnings. They become boundaries. I left their house with a folder under my arm and a silence in my throat. Not the kind born from hesitation, but the kind you carry when every word you needed to say has already been spoken and ignored. By the time I pulled into my usual parking spot near my office downtown, dusk had deepened. I didn't go home. I took the elevator to the 11th floor, the motionless kind of quiet hanging over me like a fog. The front desk was dark, but the office itself glowed faintly, motion-activated bulbs flickering as I passed. Yvette was waiting for me inside, her blazer folded neatly over the back of a chair, a legal pad resting on her lap. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she said, already flipping to a page. I didn't. There's a transfer of deed document filed in your name, she explained, dated 11 months ago. It moves the Eastfield property into something called the Graves Family Trust, and that's not your signature. I exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. Show me. She slid the printout across the desk. I didn't even need to study it. The loops in the signature tried to mimic mine, but the slant was too wide, the spacing too perfect. I'd signed enough documents in the haze of long days and tired hands to know what my real handwriting looked like. This wasn't it. Who filed it? She tapped her pen. Maris submitted it, with Vernell's notary stamp. We matched it to previous records. So that was it. They hadn't just asked, they'd taken. Boldly, quietly. Yvette tilted her head. Do you want to escalate this now or hold? I answered without thinking. Now. The next morning, still riding the chill from what I'd learned, I walked into my bank for what should have been a routine check-in on a wire transfer. Instead, a flag popped up on my profile. A loan. 120 sort. In my name. I leaned forward. Excuse me? The branch manager, a soft-voiced man in his 50s, pulled me into a side room. It's tied to a bridge loan on a residential flip, secured by a signature authorization document from your personal file. I hadn't authorized anything. I hadn't co-signed. I hadn't even been asked. They had used an old ID, a copy of an address form from 5 years ago. I'd given them access once, when I trusted they wouldn't weaponize it. They did. I walked out of the bank with my jaw clenched and my accounts locked. I filed a fraud report within the hour. That afternoon, I called every institution my name had ever touched and gave one instruction: separate me from them. They had turned my name into currency, and now that currency was going to be cut off. By the time I reached their house again, I wasn't shaking, I wasn't rehearsing. I walked through the front door without knocking. They were in the living room, Theda folding laundry, Vernell staring at the television like it was more important than my presence. Maris was leaning on the kitchen counter, scrolling her phone. I didn't wait for greetings. I placed 2 printed documents on the coffee table. One was the forged deed transfer. The other, the loan application. This ends now, I said, voice steady. You've made the last withdrawal from my name. Theda blinked, then stood slowly. Ilara, we didn't mean... You never do, I cut in. You just take, and when you're caught, you call it family business. Maris laughed under her breath. Are you seriously doing this? Over a piece of paper? No, over a dozen, I said. Over a pattern. Over the fact that you forged legal documents and took out debt under my identity. Vernell finally turned to face me. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I took one step forward. If you ever use my name again, on anything, I will bring this into a courtroom, and I will not flinch. The room went still. Theda reached out, her hand soft and shaking. I didn't let it touch me. Don't confuse my silence for forgiveness, I said quietly. Not anymore. I turned, walked out, and shut the door behind me without looking back. By the time I got back to the office, the sun had already dipped behind the taller buildings. The air had that early evening thickness, quiet but not restful. I didn't sit at my desk. I didn't take off my coat. I walked straight to the back, flipped on the private line, and dialed Yvette. She picked up on the second ring. They're not done, I told her. I don't think they ever intended to be. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry. I'd passed that stage months ago, but because I could feel the shift coming. You know the kind. Like before a storm hits, when the wind stills, but the clouds hold their breath. The next morning, it arrived. It started with an anonymous email forwarded by my assistant. Subject line, image versus integrity. Inside, a single line in bold. Your image matters more than your attitude. Tulsa talks. You should too. I didn't need to guess where it came from. The sender was cloaked behind a generic domain, but our IT security flagged the IP, registered to a residential address that matched my parents' home. I sat with that for a moment. not out of surprise, but because I knew what came next. I called Yvette again. She didn't even wait for pleasantries. "What now?" she asked. "We trace, we log, and we start the paperwork," I said. That same afternoon, my voicemail was full. One message had the same ominous tone. "Failure to honor familial duty will lead to a public appeal for restitution." Restitution. That was the word they used. 2 days later, a video surfaced in a local Facebook group. A snippet from a keynote I gave 2 years ago at a women's tech conference. It had been meant to encourage people like me, those building with scraps, alone, unseen. The clip had been sliced to sound like this. "No one helped me. I had to do it all alone because they weren't capable." Out of context, it sounded cruel. In truth, the full line had been, "No one helped me at the start, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't believe. I had to prove I was capable first." Didn't matter. The damage was done. The comment section filled fast. "She sounds bitter. Ungrateful daughter, hope her parents disown her. People like her forget where they came from." I watched the flood of strangers dissect my life from behind keyboards, none of them knowing who they were defending. I didn't respond publicly, not on Facebook, not with a press release. That's what they wanted, me dancing in the mud so they could say, "See, she's not who she claims to be." Instead, I made 3 calls. First, to Yvette. We filed a takedown request, citing defamation, unauthorized editing, and malicious intent. Second, to my PR advisor. I authorized a one-time article, a long-form piece in the Tulsa Independent. No accusations, no dragging names through the dirt. Just truth, clean and sharp. Third, to myself, because that night, while brushing my teeth, I looked into the mirror and said aloud, "They're not after justice, they're after control." And control, I'd learned, doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's smiling while slashing your tires. Sometimes it's pretending you're still part of the family while they sharpen knives behind your back. That week, The Independent ran the feature. No headlines screamed betrayal. No names dropped. Just a simple story about how building something from nothing often costs you more than people think. It ended with a quote I chose myself. "The story you tell may get you sympathy, but the truth I hold gets me peace." They didn't respond, not in words anyway. But the silence? It was loaded. It was calculated. And I knew it wasn't over. The silence didn't last. It never does in my family. 2 mornings after the article ran, I opened the front door expecting a package delivery. Instead, a man in a suit handed me a large white envelope and said my name like it was a warning. "Ilara Montlow?" I nodded. He gave a tight professional smile and walked away without another word. Inside was a summons. A civil suit. Plaintiffs, Vernell and Theda Graves. The claim? Emotional distress. Financial abandonment. A direct violation of Oklahoma's Elder Responsibility Clause. I sat down at my kitchen table, still holding the envelope, hands flat against the wood like I was bracing for an earthquake. I read it twice. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just read. They'd turned family into litigation. I scanned the contents slowly. They'd listed expenses I had never agreed to cover, exaggerated years of emotional burden, and argued that I had publicly disrespected those who raised her. I called Yvette. "They're suing me," I said. "My parents, my name, in court." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "We'll file the response." The news didn't break me. It hardened something, solidified a truth I had been circling for years. They were never interested in reconciliation, only leverage. Later that afternoon, I pulled into the parking lot near Yvette's office, not ready to go inside just yet. I sat there, fingers resting on the steering wheel, when my phone rang. It was Bryony. "Hey, Aunt Elle." Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Hi, sweetheart." There was a beat of silence. Then, Mom said, "If you don't settle, I can't go to college. I felt something heavy slide into my chest. She said you're tearing the family apart, that you want to make them suffer. I swallowed the ache and kept my voice calm. You shouldn't be in the middle of this, Bryony. I know, she said quickly. I didn't mean to call. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes. Bryony, listen to me. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe them my soul. She didn't speak again, just breathed on the other end. I could hear her trying not to cry. After we hung up, I sat for a while, engine still running. Eventually, I went upstairs to Yvette's office. I signed the counterclaim, not for revenge, but for protection. That night, I opened my financial software and began the formal severing. I froze every shared account connected to inheritance, backtracked through every document with my family's name tied to my brand, and initiated a full legal lockout on the use of my identity in business. No more loopholes, no more blind spots. Then I wrote the final cease and desist letter to the board of my sister's nonprofit. It was not emotional. It was not petty. It was closure with a timestamp. You don't get to weaponize my compassion anymore, I wrote at the end. When I finished, I poured a glass of water, sat at my kitchen counter, and just watched it. The condensation trailing down the glass, the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me, the echo of my own breathing in a room that no longer felt like a war zone. They hadn't left me. They just never saw me standing. I didn't sleep much the night before the panel. I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse. I just stared at the ceiling fan moving in slow, lazy circles, like it had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, I felt like I was standing in the middle of a fuse, and someone else had already lit the match. The community forum was held at the Civic Center downtown. Not the glossy auditorium used for concerts and ribbon cuttings, but the smaller chamber tucked off the side, the one used for PTA meetings and city zoning arguments. That felt fitting, honest, unpolished. I was invited quietly, no fanfare. A private email from one of the event organizers. We know your story matters, even if people don't want it told. I arrived 5 minutes early. The room was already filling up. Local news cameras lined the back wall, volunteers adjusted microphones, and the hum of conversation felt charged, like everyone sensed something was about to be exposed. They just didn't know what. I didn't bring anyone with me, no team, no lawyer, just a manila folder and a calm I'd earned the hard way. When they called my name, I walked up, steadied my hands on the podium, and looked out at a room full of familiar strangers. Faces I'd grown up with, teachers I hadn't seen since 10th grade, neighbors who once asked me to babysit their kids but hadn't spoken to me since the lawsuit. I didn't start with a greeting. I didn't thank anyone. I just breathed and began. Sometimes, I said slowly, when people can't get to you in private, they try to break you in public. A few people shifted in their chairs. I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm not here to defend myself either. I'm here because silence has limits, and when you don't speak, people start telling your story for you. I paused, let that sink in. For over a year, I've watched my name passed around like property, used in lawsuits, in rumors, in campaigns I never supported. I've been called selfish, arrogant, ungrateful, and I stayed quiet. Until now. I opened the folder, took out my phone, and plugged it into the AUX line the staff had prepped earlier. I didn't look up when I hit play. My mother's voice filled the room. You don't need to come back, Ilara. There's nothing for you here. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence that followed did more damage than shouting ever could. I waited, then spoke again. I didn't leave them. I respected their wishes. No one moved. I could feel breaths being held. Someone near the front put a hand to their mouth. I've been painted as the one who abandoned them, but they were the ones who handed me the brush. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. I left the podium the same way I came, quiet, measured, steady. Outside, the wind had picked up, the kind that moves trash cans slightly and scatters leaves without warning. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked straight toward my car. A reporter stepped in front of me, microphone raised. I shook my head. No statements today. I heard her try again, but I kept walking. As I reached the lot, a voice called out from behind. It wasn't loud, but it cut through. Ilara! I turned. It was Mrs. Redmond, my old Sunday school teacher. She looked smaller now, her shoulders more sunken, but her eyes were just as clear as I remembered. She handed me a folded note. That was all, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't open it until I was seated, engine still off. You didn't have to explain, but thank you for not hiding. That was it. 7 words that landed deeper than anything said in that room. I sat in my car for a long while after that. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let the stillness wrap around me. Because some stories don't need an audience. They just need to be told. The next week passed without incident. No follow-ups, no public statements, not even a whisper from anyone in the family. It was like someone had quietly pulled the curtain shut behind the last act. The silence wasn't cold. It was vacant. And that, somehow, was worse. I was in the middle of proofreading a grant proposal when Yvette called. She never called unless something was final. It's over, she said simply. They dropped the case. No response, no counters, just gone. I let the words settle between us. No explanation? I asked. Not a word, she replied. They just let it die. There was nothing left to say. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't read the legal notice she forwarded. I archived the email, deleted the notification, and closed my laptop. I didn't need closure written in legal language. I'd already written my own. Later that evening, as I watered the plants along the windowsill, I noticed how much they'd grown. Some of them I'd nearly given up on, convinced they wouldn't recover after overwatering or too much sun. But they did. Quietly, steadily, without apology. That night, an email pinged in my inbox. It was from Bryony. No subject line, just a few lines in the body. I didn't believe everything they said. I still want to go to college. I just didn't know what to do. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a plea. It was honest. And that made it land harder than any of her mother's speeches ever had. I opened a folder from my desktop, scrolled through my documents, and attached a PDF. A scholarship award letter in her name. Fully funded. My reply was short. You don't owe me thanks. Just promise not to become like them. I clicked send, then leaned back and looked at the ceiling. I wasn't sure if she'd reply. I didn't need her to. Some things are better left without punctuation. Around midnight, I walked into my home office and paused by the wall. There, in a simple black frame, hung a photograph I hadn't told anyone I had printed. It was from my company's soft launch party, the night our platform finally went live. I was in the middle of the group, laughing, hand mid-gesture, surrounded by my team. No filters, no stylists, no forced smiles, no family. It used to bother me. For years, I'd convinced myself that every big moment needed their presence to be real. That without their witness, it was somehow incomplete. But looking at that photo now, I saw something else. Proof. Not of success, but of self. I didn't frame it for validation. I framed it because it was mine. I turned off the lights and walked back to the kitchen, the sound of the hallway lamp clicking as it cooled. I made myself a cup of tea, not because I needed comfort, but because it had become a habit that reminded me I was safe. Sitting at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd shed like skin. The daughter who stayed quiet, the sister who gave too many second chances, the woman who waited for apologies that never came. I didn't hate them. I just stopped returning to places that kept proving I wasn't welcome. And that, I realized, was peace. Before we end this story, let me say something from my heart. Woman to woman, person to person. If you've made it this far, then maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've had to walk away from people you once loved, not because you stopped caring, but because they refused to see you standing on your own. Here's what I've learned. Forgiveness doesn't always mean letting people back in. Sometimes it means letting go of who you thought they'd become. And peace? It's not always loud or celebrated. Sometimes peace looks like sitting in your own space, with your own truth, and not needing anyone to validate it. I used to believe family was about who showed up at the table, but now I believe family is anyone who respects your boundaries and never weaponizes your silence. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away to find peace? Have you ever been blamed for setting boundaries they never honored? I want to hear your story. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you been the Ilara in your family? Or maybe you knew one? If this video resonated with you, if even one moment hit home, leave a 1 in the comments so I know you felt it. Tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like it, that's okay too. Let me know why. I'm always open to hearing different views, because stories aren't meant to be one-sided. They're meant to start conversations. If you'd like more true-to-life stories like this, filled with heart, healing, and a little fire when needed, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss what's next. Your support helps me keep telling stories that matter. Thank you for being here. Until the next one, stay grounded, stay kind, and always choose peace when it costs nothing but your pride.